All right, today, speaking of the media, I want to talk about liberal media bias. And really, this is a very short lesson with a lot of examples. And I probably won't give you all the examples because I keep adding to them through the years. All right, let me first of all give you the basic problem. The basic problem is that the media has an obvious liberal bias. Is that obvious? So, all right. But not in the sense, I don't think as serious as people mention it anyway. I don't think it's some grand conspiracy. I think it's just that they're all liberals. Okay? Imagine if all the major news stations were run by the guys in this classroom. Think of how the gay marriage stories would be covered. Think about the Black Lives Matters would have been covered. All right, we could look at all of our different networks and say, "Wow, look, they all cover it the same way." And say, yes, because we all coming at it as Christians, the same perspective. And well, the problem is, media is dominated by liberals. So all of these programs, all of the coverage, all of it is slanted the same direction. So not that there's not at some points, there are some times where Rush Limbaugh will do this. He'll pull quote clips from a whole bunch of different news stations, and they're all using the same phrase about something, which does make it a little bit suspicious. But there are mostly that is Associated Press or somebody will send out an article and they'll use some phrasing in it and people just pick that up and use it. Kind of like what you do on papers. You don't put quotations around it and cite it. You just don't do that. Use the words in your paper. So really the problem isn't so much that there's this grand conspiracy. It's just that they're all liberals. And that's the way we expect it if who should we pick on? If Mr. Schreiber ran a newspaper. That'd be exciting. And there was Bernie Sanders was speaking, and he had an article about Bernie Sanders. It would be, "This guy's a crazy socialist. What idiots would listen to him?" That'd be the whole article. I mean, it would be, "This is insane." Right? And if some liberal covered the same event, they're going to talk about how much he cares for people and loves everybody and wants to lift the oppression of society off of people, and be completely different coverage. All right, so really the heart of the problem is that there's a whole bunch of liberals in the media. They dominate it. Part of it is their whole worldview. How deep do you want to go here? Christians, especially conservatives, we look at the way to fix problems in society is individually. If I see a problem with David, I'm going to go to him, try to address that. We soul win that way. We look individually. Liberals, they look at societal changes. We want to change all of society. We want Congress to pass a law to fix this. And they view the media much that same way. It's a way to change all of society. They don't think individually. They think as a group. So just the whole ideology pushes in that direction. So it's not surprising that we see a whole lot more there. The same ideology tends to push more liberals into politics, right? We look at politics, or at least I look at politics mostly as a necessary evil. You have to be involved somewhat to protect our rights and freedoms. They look at it as the only thing. If politics is it, getting the government to change things, that's the only way to do it. So anyway, it's part of it just comes out of the belief systems of liberals and conservatives that it ends up being dominated by liberals. This has gotten better than it used to be. Way back in the old days, now there I'm talking about before me even, before there was the internet and talk radio and things like that, it was completely dominated by liberals. The big three media, ABC, CBS, and NBC, they dominated completely. But now with the internet and talk radio and things like that, there's at least places for conservative voice. But as a whole, it's dominated by liberals, and that's why there's this liberal slant in it. It is funny to hear Hillary Clinton and others talk about a vast right-wing conspiracy in the media. Right? I don't know where she's looking, but it's not there. So, okay, so that's a basic problem. Let me give you some details and examples. Let's start off with an article that was written by Bernard Goldberg. Does anybody know that name? Sounds familiar. All right, he used to work at CBS. CBS News from 1972 to 2000. It's a very long time, worked at CBS News. In 1996, he wrote an article called "Networks Need a Reality Check." Right? And he just pointed out that, hey, we're all liberals and we slant every story in this direction, and people are not listening anymore. I mean, even in 96, the major stations were losing market share. So I just wrote this article. Before that point, I mean, he'd been there since 72. I mean, he was part of the evening news. He was an anchor there. After that point, he loses favor, and in 2000 ends up leaving there. Dan Rather, I like his nickname, Dan Blather, a little bit better, but Dan Rather, in response to this article, said, "I will put up a billboard, put up billboard space on 42nd Street. I'll wear a sandwich board. I will do whatever is necessary to say that I'm not willing to be cowed by anybody's political agenda." Right, this is responding to an article written by somebody that works at CBS News where he worked, right, but just that bristling. 4 months before this, he had introduced Bernard Goldberg this way: "Tonight on the CBS Evening News, we're pleased to welcome back to our broadcast veteran correspondent, colleague, and friend, Bernard Goldberg, to share his unique perspectives on the events of the day." All right. And 4 months later, after he writes this article, just saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't just slant everything in a liberal direction. All of a sudden, he's this bad guy, and Dan Rather is talking about, standing on righteousness and principle. I'm not going to be cowed by his attacks. Changed very, very quickly. Anyway, that article eventually writes a book and other things here, but that generated a lot of traction in 96, and ever since then, even more. So, all right, so that was one example, Bernard Goldberg writing that article. Let me give you some other examples here. These first couple ones are examples he points out as examples of media bias. Now we're going way back. He pointed to Steve Forbes. Anybody know that name? Forbes magazine. He ran for president. He called for a flat tax. And this is the way the flat tax was described. Now think of a flat tax. Would that be good or bad? Very good, all right, but this is the way it was described in the evening news. Steve Forbes pitches his flat tax scheme as an economic elixir good for anything that ails us. Think of the picture that's brought up in your mind. Think of, I don't know. Yes, I was thinking, Little House on a Prairie, when somebody walks, that peddler comes in with this medicine that'll cure everything. Right? Think a crackpot, this is a crazy man. And that's the image he brought up. At the end of the report about this flat tax, he said, the fact remains, the flat tax is a giant untested theory. One economist suggested before he put it in, we should test it out someplace, like Albania. So just complete disdain for this whole idea of this flat tax. All right. Another example Goldberg pointed out, let me just read the statement. This was on CBS this morning. There were two ladies coming on to talk about a sexual harassment case. One is Phyllis Schlafly. Anybody know that name? Very conservative woman. And the other was a professor, Catherine McKinnon, liberal. And here's the way they're introduced. Just ahead, we're going to ask noted law professor Catherine McKinnon and conservative spokeswoman Phyllis Schlafly to talk about that. Who there is given instant credibility? The noted law professor, obviously, and this other person is just a conservative spokesman. Phyllis Schlafly also was a lawyer. It wasn't. She wasn't just somebody talking into the wind. But anyway, presented completely in a biased way. In the end of his article, Bernard Goldberg finished it this way: "There's a better chance that Peter Jennings would identify Mother Teresa as the old broad that used to work in India than there is that he would call a liberal Democrat a liberal Democrat." I mean, that wasn't going to happen. We can malign other people, but a liberal Democrat is a noted professor, an esteemed politician, a respect, whatever. They're not a liberal. Republicans or conservatives are always slammed that way. So in his article, he pointed to things like that to point out these problems. Let me give you some other examples. How far should we go? Other examples. During the 80s and early 90s, there were waves and waves of articles about the epidemic of homelessness in America. Who ran the White House during the 80s and early 90s? I know we're going back to ancient history. Anybody here 20? 21? So you're born 95? 93? Wow. Bunch of children. All right, well, I remember the 80s and 90s. Who was the president during the 80s and early 90s? Clinton is the second 2/3 of the 90s. Reagan and Bush, first Bush. All right, so there's these waves of stories about homelessness described as people just like, maybe next week you might be homeless, as if there's no connection. It just happens to you. You get the flu, you become homeless, it just happens to you. So, what's that?
You got a flat on the way home?
Yeah, and you're homeless. It's described that way. The numbers were crazy. In '89, it was estimated there were 3 million homeless people. All right. There were some actual legitimate studies that put it more around 250,000. But the Evening News was going to 3 million homeless people. Tom Brokaw in '89, this is at the end of Reagan. Reagan, as commander-in-chief, was the military's best friend. This was on TV. He gave the Pentagon almost everything it wanted, and then there's a pause, and it starts showing pictures of these homeless people. Social programs. They suffered under Reagan, but he refused to see the cause and effect. Everybody was homeless because of Reagan. So there's this homelessness, this crazy epidemic under Reagan and Bush. Starting about 92, when Clinton came in, all of a sudden, it wasn't a big deal anymore. And starting up in 2000. Second Bush, all of a sudden it's a big deal again. This is from 2001. In New York, the number of homeless in the shelter system has risen above 25,000 a night for the first time since the late 80s. What they're saying is you have to go back to Reagan to find out that it's bad as it is now under Bush. CNN, the number of homeless people is rising this summer. That was in 2001. So again, homelessness wasn't a big deal under Clinton, but under the Republicans, all of a sudden it was. So, all right, so bias. Another one is the coverage of AIDS through the years. Let me read you some headlines. AIDS is a disease for queers. All right, and that's where it is. It's some IV drug users, but it's queers almost predominantly. But this is the types of news reports and headlines we get. U.S. News and World Report, the disease of them is suddenly the disease of us. All right, USA Today, cases rising fastest among heterosexuals. Atlantic Monthly, heterosexuals and age, the second stage of the epidemic. No, these are 10 or 15 years old now, and none of this has happened, but that was the thing. Oprah Winfrey, a great intellectual, back in '87 said this: AIDS has both sexes running scared. Research studies now project that 1 in 5, listen to me, hard to believe, 1 in 5 heterosexuals could be dead from AIDS at the end of the next 3 years. That'd be by 1990. You guys remember that, like the Black Death that swept across America? Wait, you weren't alive yet. Your parents, asked them about the Black Death that swept across America. It didn't happen. 1 in 5. It's no longer just a gay disease, believe me. All the evidence, even at that point, it pointed exactly the opposite to that. But the liberal agenda didn't fit that. So, these are some stats about AIDS. Oh, well, I mean, it's a disease of the queers. Dan Rather made this statement in 1992. He said, "It's one of those political myths about press bias. Most reporters don't know whether they're Republican or Democrat and vote every which way." Right. That was in 92. In 92, 89% voted for Bill Clinton, and 7% for Bush of the media. So it wasn't just that. Let's do a couple more quotes here. This is Peter Jennings in 94. Now, this is ancient history, but anybody remember what happened in 90? Anybody read about what happened in 94, 2 years before you were born? The Republicans swept in and took over Congress. All right. Clinton won in 92. And 94, we have a Republican takeover of the House, particularly, and it hadn't been for, it's been like 40 years since it took over the House. And this is the way Peter Jennings described that. Some thoughts on those angry voters. Ask parents of any 2-year-old and they can tell you about those temper tantrums. The stomping feet, the rolling eyes. This is on the evening news. The screaming. Imagine a nation full of uncontrolled 2-year-old rage. The voters had a temper tantrum last week. Parenting and governing don't have to be dirty words. The nation can't be run by an angry 2-year-old. That's the way he described the Republicans taking over the House in 92. Newt Gingrich, if you know that name, he becomes the Speaker of the House at that point. Clarence Thomas, anybody know that name? Black man. Is it racist to observe that? Member of the Supreme Court. This was a statement about him. Julianne Malveaux, USA Today columnist, said this after he was confirmed. He said, "The man is on the court. You know, I hope his wife feeds him lots of eggs and butter and he dies early like many black men do of heart disease."
No, that's racist.
Just think about it. And it was let go. Imagine if somebody said that about Jesse Jackson. But it was let go. It's okay. It's crazy.
Did you hear that for the first time in 10 years he spoke in the Supreme Court?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Since Scalia, who was really the vocal one and stuff like
Yeah.
that, maybe he's
Stepping up to talk. Yeah, he always just sits there and looks.
He drove somebody on some gun rights issue.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't hear that. There we go. Clarence Thomas, still around. Apparently his wife did not feed him eggs and butter. So, man, that's disappointing. All right. Maybe back to a little more modern times. Anybody remember Sarah Palin? All right. I wish I didn't, maybe. Washington Post, Inside Washington, February 12th, this would be 2010. I watched her speak at the Tea Party convention. Then I listened to the interview that followed with the Tea Party chairman, and it was embarrassing at points, to the point where you just wanted to avert your gaze when she starts to talk. Simple thoughts, very simple-mindedly expressed. Just as the Supreme Court nominee who was defeated, you know, everybody needs to have a little mediocre representation, and that's what I am. That's what she is. That's how Sarah Palin was described. I'm not a big Sarah Palin fan, but to say that she's simple and simple-minded is a little bit biased. So enough. All right, this quote is from 2005, referencing people who were displaced by the hurricane that hit New Orleans, Katrina. Harry Smith, CBS early show, September the 6th. Do I need to be concerned that I'm going to go, talking about these refugees, do I need to be concerned that I'm going to go live with a church family? Are they going to proselytize me? Are they going to say, you better come to church with me or else? You're not going to get your breakfast this morning. Talking about how bad it would be if one of these people who had had their house destroyed ended up living with a Christian. And that Christian said, won't you come to church with me? That was his whole point. Think of how bad it would be. Or they could have said, there's no way for the Christian to win here. If the Christian says, no, I don't want you in my house, then they're bad. So anyway, you can see there's no way to win for them. So, all right, so the point is, the media is filled with biasness. I mean, it's there, it's everywhere. Listen to it. There's been some correction in this, and the major media outlets have lost massive shares of the market, and online venues have cut into this, but it's still there and still very prominent. If you ever doubt it, grit your teeth and watch CNN sometime. That is the hardest thing to do. Not only do they have people like Rachel Maddow, who's just dog ugly, right? And extremely liberal, but last time I watched CNN, one of the last times I was at the airport waiting for a ride to pick me up, and there's this hour and a half program about global warming. and how bad it is, and pictures of how far the glaciers used to come down now, and now the glaciers are out of sight. Just on and on and on about all this. It was tough to watch. So, okay, it's there. Now the last point here is, what do we do? What's the solution to this? Your notes probably are significantly shorter than mine for this topic, but that's fine. Any thoughts? What do we do?
We can just come to you instead of watching.
Perfect. Somehow I got to get paid, though. I guess I get a lot of. I'm kidding. Come to me. Well, that's partly the right answer. Not necessarily come to me, but instead of watching the news is partly the right answer. So, really, the answer is don't listen, don't watch. If you can't stand the biasness on CNN, then don't watch them. Don't listen to them. Don't subscribe to them. Don't go there. Don't listen. Don't watch. It's a free country. They are free to broadcast this stuff, but we don't have to watch. That is really the answer. Don't partake. What would how do I phrase this question? What would be an inappropriate answer? That's very vague. Let me just tell you. If you're thinking we need to pass some law, we need the government to step in to make this fair, that's very much the wrong answer. All right, that is the liberal solution. Liberals always want the government to fix things. Remember, that's societal. We can't expect people individually to make the right decision. We need to pass some law. That is not the answer. So if you're thinking that, we got to have a law that says they have to be fair, no, we don't need that. There's laws if they're going to lie and malign people. There's laws against that, but we don't need the government. The government has done stuff like that. Anybody heard of the fairness doctrine? Nobody? There's some talk of reviving it. It went away about 1990. It opened the door for talk radio as we know of it. The fairness doctrine said that if a radio station had a conservative on to do a program, they had to have a liberal on for the same amount of time, right, to be fair. Right? It wasn't nothing fair to the owner. It wasn't, this is your station, you can do what you want to it. Not that kind of fairness, but if you had a conservative, you had to have a liberal. So if somebody wanted to have Rush Limbaugh on for 3 hours, they had to have some liberal on also for 3 hours. And it economically wasn't feasible because nobody wants to listen to the liberal. All right, so it just put a damper on that. Once that's gone away, it's opened up the door to all the conservative talk show programs we have today because that fairness doctrine is not there. In the last couple of years, I've heard the FCC floating the idea of bringing back the fairness doctrine, and it would undermine a lot of the conservative talk shows we have today. So anyway, the government is not the answer. Just don't listen. Don't watch. I just told you to watch, but don't watch. Just maybe enough to make sure you know it's sickening, and then stay away from it. So, okay, questions about that? I thought about having that be the lecture that you watch, and having you watch some footage, but I never got it together. So you get it this way. All right, I want to try to do 2 more things today. And I think we can get that in. So we have the media is liberal. Not a lot of question. The next thing I want to talk about is political parties. This is a little bit out of the order that I wanted to do them originally because we skipped over the liberal media. But political parties. The lecture you watched or will watch, in some cases maybe, had to do with politics and you being involved personally and how far a pastor should be involved in politics, both legally and as a Christian. What's the balance there? And then we talked about political campaigns. We're getting watching some political campaigns that didn't have all these elements to win. The topic today is political parties. A little bit about them. So, first of all, just a very basic definition of a political party. It's a voluntary group of citizens who organize themselves to win elections, control the government, influence public policy, etc. A voluntary group of citizens. That is at the heart of it. Now, because they are seeking to have somebody from their party become president or senator or mayor of the city or governor, we often forget the fact that this is just a private organization. Right? It's not the government didn't create the Republican and Democratic Party. It's a private organization. And it is then a little bit irritating, when the government, there's an appropriate level of involvement, I think, for the government, but it really is irritating when the government starts to meddle with how this organization operates. Right? Lots of states have open primaries, where the party chooses their candidate. And what it means is anybody in the state can come and vote. Imagine if the state dictated that churches have open elections for pastor. And we say, wait a second, they're not members of our church. Why should they get to vote? But states, many places it's mandated that there's an open primary. Anybody that wants to can come in and vote. You in Indiana will vote on whatever the day is in May, and you can pick Republican or Democrat. And you get the ballot for that party. I could go, that'd be fun, pull the Democrat ballot and vote for all of their candidates. I don't have to have ever been a member of the party or anything, but I can go and vote. So to me, it's irritating when the government starts meddling like that. This is a private organization. I think they should have the right to say, hey, no, you have to be a Republican. The Republican Party can maybe issue badges or something. You got to show your superhero Republican badge to go vote or something. Perfectly fine. But at the heart, it's a voluntary organization. We can't forget that. They are trying to win elections and other things, so there's obviously a connection with the government, especially if they win. Then they have members of their party that are the governor or in the legislature and things like that. But it is just a private organization. So, all right, so definition of political party. The next thing is different types of systems. I just broke this down into three different pieces. Three different types. The first type of system is a single party system. Can anybody guess how many parties there are in a single party system? Did you have to guess?
I did.
Oh, okay. We'll pray for you. Just one party, only one legal party. The Soviet bloc countries used to have elections. And they would talk about, we got 100% of the vote. The people love us. They forgot to mention that there was only one person to vote for. It was a single-party election. So a single-party system, that's sometimes called a no-party system because it really boils down to the political party and the government are the same entity there. So. Okay, the next is a two-party system. In this system, there are two major political parties. And major there is a significant word, two major political parties. We have a two-party system in our country. There are other minor parties. There's the Green Party and the Libertarian Party and some of these others, but there's two major parties, a two-party system. A couple of comments about the two-party system. Two-party system tends to be more stable, and we don't have any Canadians in here, so we can bash them. So, it tends to be more stable. The election boils down to a choice between two different people. What it does is it forces, prior to the election, everybody to get together and form their alliances and friendships and things like that. So whoever wins has a majority of the people behind them. As opposed to a multi-party system, if there's 4 or 5 candidates and the guy that got the most votes became president or something, he might not have a majority of the country that actually voted for him. So, he might get 40% and somebody else 30 and somebody 20 and the other guy whatever's left. The supporters of these people might actually get together and work against the president, even though the president wins the election. It creates some instability in that way. So the two-party system, it forces people to make those groups and associations prior to the election so that whoever wins actually has the support, at least at that point, of more than half the country. So anyway, it's not foolproof, but it does tend to be more stable. All right, second thing here with the two-party system is that our system in America pushes us into a two-party system. There's nothing that in black and white says, only two parties are legal. But our system pushes us this way. Okay. And the biggest feature of our system is we have a lot of what are called single-member districts. A district where only one person is going to win and assume the office, right? Porter County, I should know this, I think they have 5 members of the county board. Imagine if we had a county-wide election and the top 5 people go to the county board. That would be then 5 members from the same district. right? As opposed to taking the county and splitting it up into 5 pieces. And each piece, only the top candidate goes. Everybody see the difference? We have a lot of single-member districts. There are some places where there's multi-member districts, but we have a lot of single-member districts, which means only the winning party gets anything. If you get second place in a single-member district, you get nothing. Right? If you get second place in a 5-member district, then you get a seat in the county council. Right? So our system pushes us this way. There's no prize for second, third, or fourth place. There's only a prize for first place, which then pushes us towards 2 parties, because there's no reason really to get third place, because you get nothing. Does that make sense? So our system pushes this way. There's no law against third or fourth parties, but just the fact that there's no prize for second place means only the most significant and viable parties are going to have any real chance. So, okay, 2-party system. And then the last is a multi-party system. Here we've got 3 or more parties that are significant. Three or more parties that are significant have real chances of winning. And here you get all kinds of coalitions of 2 different parties that will get together, and all the members in those 2 parties in Congress or the legislature will work together, and if something happens where they don't like each other, then that coalition breaks up, and you tend to have a little more instability there because the coalitions are made after the election as opposed to before. So anyway, multi-party system. Canada and England and some other places have multi-party systems. Not that it's evil or wicked or nasty, but not quite as stable. So different types of systems. The next thing is, what do these political parties do? Here are just a list of 5 things that these parties do. Some of this will be self-evident, I hope. First of all, they nominate candidates. The Republican Party in Indiana is going to nominate somebody to be as their candidate for president, as their candidate for governor, as their candidate for the U.S. Senate and the House and the seats on the county council, etc. They nominate candidates. The parties do that. Okay, second thing they do is campaign. They organize campaigns, they collect money, they try to help these people win. I mean, that's part of the reason they exist. I used to be a Republican precinct committeeman, which is basically nothing. If you listen to the lecture, I told you what I got to do. It wasn't too much. But anyway, so my name's in the Republican Party, and they call me periodically wanting money. All right. If we get Ted Cruz as the candidate for president, they might start getting my money again. But man, when Romney was the president, the candidate, they're calling me, wanting me to give them money. Forget it. Right? But it was the party itself collecting money and trying to organize things and campaign for him. Not him in particular. He did his own, but the party itself was running campaigns trying to get these people in. So, all right, the third thing they do is organize the government, the candidates that win. Then they have to run the government. There's some responsibility. I can't remember what sporting event it was. Might have been college wrestling. We used to have it on 2 different nights. One night would be all the preliminaries, and then we'd come back the next Thursday and have the finals. And I remember somebody commenting that they were disappointed that they won because they had to come back the next week and do it all over again. It's like, wait a second, I won? There's some responsibility that goes with it. The same thing happens here. If the Republican candidates win and they control the county council, then they have to run the government. I mean, there's some real responsibility. So they organize the government in that sense. So organize the government. The fourth thing is monitor the government. The organizing, that's primarily the winning side. Whichever party wins, that falls to the candidate, the members of that party that are in office. Monitoring the government is more the losing side. They have to watch and keep track of what's going on. And if those running the government are doing something wrong, then they're there to point it out. All right, they have some real interest in pointing it out. Oh well, monitor the government. And then the last thing, at least on my list, is develop a platform. The parties will develop a platform. Anybody know what that word, what we're referring to there? Not a stage for the people to speak from.
Usually it's made up of the issues that they campaign on. So
Yeah.
they say, like liberals, they could say lunches for the kids and free healthcare.
Yeah, and clean water and
Yeah.
sunnier skies and no taxes and
Yeah.
all that good stuff. And Republicans, they want the kids to starve. They want smog. so it's a statement of the political party or the party's beliefs, what they're pushing for. If you really love looking things up, you can go back and read the political party platforms from 1860 when Lincoln won. You can read their stances on almost said abortion, on slavery at that point. So they put together this party platform, like an official statement of where the party stands on different issues. And this is done nationally, and usually states will issue their own political party platform, but just a statement of what they believe. So, okay, so some things political parties do. Next thing is, how do you become a member of a political party? And basically, you just pick one. There's some states on your registration, you actually declare it. But it boils down to really, you just pick it. There's not a form to fill out or an application process, and you have to wait to get approved. You just pick it. You can switch whenever you want to. The only time it really becomes significant is in that primary. That you have to decide which party you're in the primary. So, and I really wish that the state governments allowed the parties to be much more exclusive. I mean, it's a private organization. Imagine if we got together and said, all right, we're going to choose somebody that we're going to push to be the dog catcher in Porter or something like that. For the government to say, well, you have to let anybody in Porter County that wants to vote to choose your candidate, that it kind of undermines the whole idea of a private organization. So, but anyway, basically you just get to choose. There's not really any special paperwork to fill out. So. All right, next thing, is it better to work inside of a major party? If you were thinking about running for office, or helping a candidate. Are you better off inside a political party? I kind of have an answer that goes both ways here, but what do we think? Sarah's got her hand raised. Yeah.
I guess it'd be better for funding
Okay, that's true.
if you're not rich.
Yep, if you're not Donald Trump, you need some money. So you have access to the party structure, their funding. They'll put out advertisements. They'll issue often mailers and things like that with all kinds of candidates on it, and you get listed there. So that's very true. So I guess my partial answer would be yes, if there's somebody you can stomach. If there's a party you can stomach, then you're much better off being there. The framework is already in place, right? Rather than creating your own. People have created their own, but it is a whole lot more work. So, but anyway, if there's one you can stomach, you're not going to. Hopefully, you're not thinking, is there enough in the Democratic Party that I can stomach being part of it? Right? If nothing else, the fact that they like to kill babies, that should be enough to keep us out of it. Right? But the Republican Party, or whatever the party is in your area that's stronger on the conservative side, if you can stomach it, all right, there's going to be Catholics there, there's going to be people that drink there, there's going to be all kinds of things that we wouldn't line up with as Christians. But there is some advantage to being part of that political party. So anyway, that's the way I have it. If you can stomach it, if there's somebody there that you can agree with enough, you're much better off there. You don't have to reproduce and create your own framework. You get to participate in the primaries to choose that party's candidate. It gives you a little bit of say. So anyway, much better off there. Okay, political parties. Questions there? Everybody's all excited. All right, there's one other thing here that I think we'll skip and start into next time. So I will see you on Friday.